The work I'm doing for this project is a commission for Gibside, which is a National Trust property just outside Newcastle. And I've been making these huge ceramic urns or pots. There's an orangery at Gibside, and in the last century, a row of a dozen or so urns were removed from that orangery and sent up to Glamis Castle in Scotland, which is where part of Mary Eleanor Bowes' estate. And so the idea of this project is actually to bring those pots back to Gibside, in a sense, but to use those to tell the story of Mary Eleanor Bowes. So this has been firing for about 2 days, just over 2 days, and it's just come down now to the temperature where the kiln can be opened and we can see what's happened to the object. Okay. Wow, right, that seems to have come out okay. The lettering are excerpts from the journals of William Paterson, who was a kind of protege of Mary Eleanor Bowes. She was very interested in all things botanical, and she sent off this Scottish gardener, or sponsored his trip to South Africa, to bring back botanical samples that hadn't been seen in Britain before, because this was all the kind of craze in the 18th century. So the writing on this are excerpts from his journals that he eventually had published when he came back he did four voyages. But there are also names of some of the plants that he collected and brought back. And the idea with some of these pots is that they'll actually be planted up with some of the botanical samples that were introduced to Britain in the 18th century. Most of the pots that I've been making for this project are based on a very simple sort of classical form, like the kind of pots that you'd find at Knossos or sort of Greek and Roman inspiration. And the reason for that is that Gibside looks to that sort of classical tradition, to the Greek and Roman architecture, for its architectural forms. This vessel is different in that I'm making it in 2 separate pieces. So when it's finished and fired, this will be the base and this will be inverted. And this piece, which is going to have a lip up here, and this handle will come round and join it together. But I want the 2 halves to be kind of forced together. And what I'm thinking about there was this kind of unholy marriage between Mary Eleanor Bowes and Andrew Stoney. There's quite an appalling story as to how this man is basically fooled Mary Eleanor into marrying him, and then he ruthlessly exploited and abused her over the next several decades, and of course this became a sensation in Georgian England, was in all the papers and press. Eventually she was able to divorce him. But one of the things I want to try to get in a number of these vessels is this idea of 2, in a sense, mismatching things, or things that are contrary, being forced and squeezed together. So I think in this pot I will actually literally staple it together with these quite aggressive looking iron staples, which will actually pull the 2 halves of the vessel together. This particular vessel won't have any writing on it because I want the emphasis to very simply be on this point at which the 2 halves are kind of forced together. So I've been trying to create objects that go with the vessels that speak about this story of Andrew Stoney and Mary Eleanor Bowes. The kind of idea of them birds standing for the separate characters is quite strong. So in a way, Mary Eleanor becomes the parrot, the parrot who's trapped in the cage, or this kind of exotic, still bound up with this idea of something exotic happening somewhere else, the way that she sent off this plant collector. So there's this very glamorous, exotic, beautiful world that's elsewhere. So in a way, the parrots are Mary Eleanor, but the raven then, or the crow, becomes Andrew Stoney. But when this is fired, then I'm going to glaze it so it's black like the beak of this parrot here, quite kind of dark and sinister looking. So each of these parrots is going to be placed in this group of vessels here. These will be spread out in the walled garden so that they'll be kind of communicating or somehow interacting with each other in a way across the distance of the walled garden. I think one of the challenges of the whole project really has been trying to find ways that the sculptures are tied into the Mary Eleanor Bowes story, because it's such an unhappy story, it's such an unfortunate story, but at the same time you want to make an art, a piece of art that actually isn't just kind of miserable and dour and dark, and that has elements of humour and gaudiness and extravagance and all those things. I mean, one of the big differences about working in this way, working for a heritage site, is that you're always having to come back to the story, come back to the narrative, rather than just allow the thing to go wherever it wants to go. Because I think part of the point of the project is that the art does actually reveal something about the history of Gibside. It says something about that, even if it becomes in rather oblique sort of terms. But I think that's going to be one of the things that's really interesting, is how much the public take away from this as something that does actually open up the story. Well, we've had to store this one outside because it's too big to fit inside anywhere. We'll have to lie it down to actually transport it. So we've used these staples, these iron staples, to actually fix the two parts of this big tall pot together. And these ones are going to go in a group up by the avenue. So this one and the other really tall one, and then a couple of the smaller ones. Stop that black one falling. So here they are at last, after 6 months, 9 months, whatever it's been, making these pots. We brought them up last week, and actually after a bit, it was a bit hairy loading them onto the back of the wagons because they were loaded standing up, so they all look kind of rocky coming up the very steep bank up here. But they got up here okay, and the installation went pretty well. It was pretty smooth, really. So it's good to see them in the landscape. They haven't shrunk as much as I thought. Normally when you put things outside, they tend to look a lot smaller than you think they're going to, but I think they've really kept their scale here. The one thing I think works really well is the huge lump of coal, which is made out of clay, black clay. And it alludes to the way that the Gibside estate earned its money right from the get-off. So coal was transported over the estate, which was an incredibly lucrative business. And the Bowes family owned mining rights as well. So I wanted to suggest in quite a literal way what that was all about. One of the things I really like about the position here is the way that you can see Fiona's piece, the piece that's based on a Wardian case, in the background between this, and it brings the whole project together. Even though the pieces have only been here quite a short time, I've already been struck by the response that they're getting from visitors, who really seem to like them and seem to pick up the idea that they are saying something very specific about Gibside. So hopefully they're going to get a good response, and people will find something in them that speaks about coming to Gibside in a different way, or enlarges their experience of coming here.